Welcome to Question Corner number 22. We are here to answering your questions around Camunda. And today we literally have a full house. So we have Victor Franca from the community joining us today. He is a Camunda Champion, and I think he has a lot of experience when it comes to process automation. He has his own blog and he has been in this field for a long time. So I'm really happy to have you here today, Victor.
Thank you.
We also have Preeti Nirwal, who is the product manager of connectors in Camunda 8. And I'm super happy to have you here because you will give us great insights about the connectors that we have and what's going on with our roadmap. Thanks for joining.
No problem, thanks.
And on the engineering side, we have Nico Rehwaldt here. You might know him from BPM&IO, but he also is heavily involved in defining and building the Connector SDK that we have with Camunda 8. And I'm super happy that you join us here today, Nico.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. You might wonder, why is she talking and where is this guy called Maldian? He is actually on holiday. He complained that Berlin is way too hot in summer. So we put him on a bike and he's cycling up north. So it's just almost a full house. You have to deal today with me. I'm Nele and Camunda. I'm a developer advocate here at Camunda, and I'm happy to answer your questions. And how does it work for people that never joined the question corner? We have collected questions previous to the event in Slido. If you go to slido.com, you can enter the QR code, not the QR code, you can enter the QC22 and you will be at the event, or you can scan the QR code with your phone, or you find a link also in this chat that you can join. And once you enter Slido, you will have a view like this. So you have a field to ask your question if you have one question. And you also see other people that ask question already. And if you think one question is super interesting, you can upload this question here with this button. And because it's a live event, we always think the questions from the people in the event are more important. So we try to answer the questions that come up more recently as well in this question corner. And because the topic of connectors in Camunda 8 is something really new, I asked Preeti if she could give us an introduction into the topic, and I'm super happy that she agreed. So Preeti, it's all yours. Take it over.
All right, perfect. Thanks so much. I will share my screen. Okay. All right, and you guys are able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I'm really excited to give an overview on C8 connectors and our vision. So I'll cover our roadmap, and then we'll go over our brand new Connector SDK that is currently in developer preview. So let's start off. So to start, let's talk about the problems that connectors is looking to solve. So in most use cases, Camunda needs to connect to outside systems to orchestrate work. So today, our customers need to implement this connectivity themselves, and this adds additional effort and cost, and significantly delays time to value. So having connectivity out of the box would solve this problem. However, a static set of connectors provided only by Camunda would be a severely limited solution. So our customers often have in-house systems that are not widespread enough to justify our efforts to build and maintain connectors for them, and our own bandwidth to build and maintain connectors to even the most commonly used systems is limited. So to solve these problems in a scalable manner, we have to create an infrastructure that allows developers to build, maintain connectors, and to provide them to other developers who can use them in a convenient and reliable way. So our vision for connectors is to create a vibrant ecosystem of community developers, partners, and customers that build connectivity, accelerating process orchestration with any system. So we enable this by providing a developer-friendly, frictionless experience for building, testing, and maintaining connectors, and also making it easy to share and publish connectors to other developers, partners, and customers through a public marketplace. So we believe a vibrant connectors ecosystem will significantly accelerate adoption and growth of the Camunda platform. So with Camunda Platform 8, we've rolled out 2 powerful new ways to connect to other tools and systems: out-of-the-box connectors and an integration framework. So connectors communicate and build connectivity with any system or technology so they can be used to automate and orchestrate business processes that span those systems or technology. Connectors are easily discoverable in our web modeler interface today and can be inserted into BPN and diagrams. And once added to a diagram, they are configured through an intuitive properties panel. And our new integration framework lets developers build their own custom connectors. The custom connectors are perfect for organizations with legacy or homegrown systems and can be used as a more reliable automation alternative to brittle and maintenance-heavy RPA bots. So our aim is to have powerful bidirectional connectivity to invoke an outside system. So this is referred to as an outbound connector, or have a process be triggered by an outside system referred to as an inbound connector. So such flexibility delivers automation of even the most complex business processes across people, systems, and devices. So today we offer 3 out-of-the-box connectors, 1 for REST communication, 1 for email communication using SendGrid. And recently we released a Slack connector that can be used to send messages to channels or users. So our plan is to offer more connectors over the next months across a variety of the categories that you're seeing. So categories such as cloud connectors that communicate with cloud native applications. So some examples include Kafka, SQS, Camel, message queues, Lambda functions, or EventBridge. Service connectors that integrate with technology enablers like RPA, AI, or IoT services. Productivity application connectors that leverage email or Slack to notify customers of process state transition or to begin a process. Enterprise content connectors that can push or pull content to systems such as Google Drive, Box, or OpenText. And data connectors that can push or pull information from data providers such as BI systems, data lakes, or data warehouses to sort of make conditional decisions in a process. So now let's look at what we have planned on our roadmap. So starting with the items we're tackling now and for the 8.1 timeframe. So on the integrations framework side, we'll release a new feature called Connector Template that will make it easy to design the element template for custom connectors and share them with your team. So it will come with a powerful template editor to help you design the attributes and parameters required for your connector to talk to an external application. And once you've designed your template, you can publish and share it with your project team in the web modeler. So this lets your team members easily find and use that connector when they model their diagrams using the context tab. We have added also new conditional properties, so your connector template can be dynamic, and this makes it easier for you to define a single template that can cover multiple use cases. The Connector SDK, this we will cover in detail next, and you'll see how it enables us to provide our out-of-the-box connectors that are only available in SaaS today to customers and self-managed also. So the SDK also enables you to easily create the runtime behavior for your custom connector. And for us to provide bidirectional connectivity and have a process be triggered by an outside system, we need to add features to our SDK to support this. So we have started this work this quarter and anticipate it will take us until the end of the year to fine-tune inbound connectivity. So if you're interested in this topic and want to help us test our hypotheses and prototypes, please reach out and we'd love to have your early input. So moving down, looking at out-of-the-box connectors. So last month, we released a Slack connector that connects with a specified Slack workspace to send messages to channels and users from your BPMN process. Google Drive, Lambda, and SQS are the connectors we plan to release in the next month. So for Google Drive, users will be able to create an empty folder or create a file from an existing Google Docs template and pass in process variables into the file. For Lambda, users will be able to invoke their Lambda functions from a BPMN process. And for SQS, users will be able to send messages to their queue in AWS from a process. As mentioned, like partners are a key pillar for our ecosystem vision and are investing in our ecosystem by building custom connectors that will be open source and available for all users. So the connectors that are being worked on by our partners are things like email, Git, Jira, and MySQL. Some of the things we're working on tackling later on for this year. So it's the ability to share your connector template with your organization and not just your projects. The ability to share open source custom connectors to other users. So this will likely be available for 8.1. We'll continue the work needed to add inbound connector capabilities. And on the out-of-the-box connector side, we will start looking at having a Kafka connector that can publish events to topics, a connector to UiPath so users can define and execute UiPath bots, and also sort of start exploring early stages of how we can add AI capabilities like NLP or other features to enrich our connectors. ServiceNow connector built by our partner to help users integrate their processes with IT service management platforms. All right, and looking at items for later. Now these are subject to change. So as we're looking to create a vibrant ecosystem, a number of guidelines and programs will need to be published and made available to our community, to our partners and customers. So guidelines on contribution, guidelines on support of connectors, partner programs. So these will set us up to get closer to having a public connectors marketplace. And we will also continue to release new out-of-the-box connectors based on feedback and demand. So what you're seeing here are just some examples of the things that we can build, but these are of course subject to change. All right, so let's take a deeper look into our Connector SDK. So you had seen earlier that our aim is to provide a developer-friendly, frictionless experience for building, testing, and maintaining connectors. So with the Connector SDK, we're focusing on the software developer that is building the connector. So they are building and defining the connector template, and they are building the runtime. So our aim here is to enable that developer to be as productive and efficient as possible. We want them to focus on coding the domain-specific business logic for your connector, and not spend a lot of their time on sort of internal Camunda specifics, such as properties, and worry about the engine. So let's look at what are some of the objectives for the SDK. So we want to provide a foundation for reusable behavior for the runtime, simple APIs to build connectors against and make it simple to test, make it simple to run a connector in any environment, whether that's self-managed or SaaS, with adapters that can run in those environments. And your connector code itself is agnostic to where it's being hosted. And an interface to hook up shared behavior like secrets. So here's a simple interface connector developers will use to build their connector functions against. A connector function is the code that communicates with the outside system. So here we show an example of a Connect Money connector that's communicating to, let's say, Stripe. It can, of course, be any outside system. And in this simple interface, you're going to see some key utilities like getting your variables, validating your requests so you can add specific validation logic to your input, and also replacing your secrets. So you have full control over the modeler experience, and you can have secrets be invisible to your modeler if you like, but the function can still access it via this context. You then implement your business logic, and in this example, it's withdrawing the actual money. And finally, you'll be returned a response. So this is the core of the SDK, and it is, again, independent of how it's run and in which environment. And next, what you do is you wrap the function in job handlers. So we are providing a connector job handler wrapper that you can use for your function and easily run it as a handler in your job worker. And of course, you are free to create your own custom runtime as well. So as you can see, the SDK, it's really helping to provide an abstraction layer to build connector functionality and runtime. And we're removing tedious setup and engine related tasks for the connector developer so they can focus on the business logic of the actual connector. And 2 weeks ago, we shipped our first 0.1 version of the SDK. So please do try it out in the GitHub link that you're seeing. And we'd love to hear your feedback and input. And there's another link there for you to submit your feedback to us on. So these were all of the slides that I had. I will stop my share for now.
Cool. Thank you so much, Preeti. I think that gives us a really good overview for the discussion that we have and a good ground to discuss the questions that I see already or I saw already in Slido. I will share my screen quickly again because now we jump into Slido. I probably that's here. And actually we see here the questions that are coming in from the community. And in the old fashion, that's normally how we do it in the question corner. I will ask Nico as our guest, do you have a question you like to pick and you like to answer? I can scroll a little bit. Have you seen something that was in your interest?
I have seen one question, and it actually came up in the very old fashion via Zoom chat, so via webinar chat. So that's the question specifically was, is it correct that self-managed install has less connectors than cloud? I think that's a very cool question because what you can see basically in Camunda 8 SaaS, you already see those out-of-the-box connectors for Slack, for SendGrid, but also REST as a general communication utility, right? In self-managed, this or for example, people open the Camunda desktop modeler and they are like, there's no connectors. Where are the connectors, right? So that's a question that I see coming up a lot. And so one thing about like, will there be less connectors in self-managed? I would like to answer that. And the answer is no. Connectors on its own by design. So the whole connector SDK that we're building, the whole way how you actually provide this connector behavior is by design built in a way that it works in any cloud, in our cloud, but also in customer cloud if they want, but also in self-managed if you just spin it up on your local machine, enter anywhere, part of the job worker. So basically this SDK, this abstraction is built explicitly in a way that it allows you to plug in to basically into self-managed and SaaS in any context. Self-managed, actually, it will have like self-managed, you will have more control, likely, over which connectors you want to use even, right? And it also, because it is self-managed, you will also be able, similar to in the cloud, you're also right now able to contribute your own connectors already, but in self-managed it will also obviously be possible. But for example, given self-managed, you own it yourself, you likely want to be very rigid and strict on, okay, we're not using Slack, so I don't want anyone to be bothered by the Slack connector. So self-managed, again, it gives you a little bit more control. And long-term self-managed will also offer all those connectors that we offer on the cloud. That's basically the question I also wanted to answer. I hope that's okay, Nele.
That's completely okay. And I have a follow-up question based on that, what you said, because we have Victor here and he works with organizations using process automation and connectors. Would you see an advantage to be in charge of which connectors you want to make available for your organization? As Nico described, if you do it probably on a self-managed way, you might have more control which connectors you could provide to the organization.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, Neil, as I was actually talking before, I think that the connectors idea is a very important one, very strong, because even by the name of it, being an abstraction layer on top of job workers, but name it by connectors, that may make more meaning to developers and professionals of other areas or use it to work with other systems like SAP or Salesforce. Now, connector is a much more common term than job workers, just talking about the name of it. But in terms of the implementation, it's also a very interesting approach, because when developing connectors, we are more interested about things on things like application secrets, that kind of connectivity concerns. And we put the managing of variables and process instances, business keys on another side. So that's really interesting, and I believe that the connectors will leverage the use of Camunda. But by the way, I also have a question based on this. So can we ask questions as well?
Sure, you can ask any question you want.
All right. So I understand the layer on top of job workers, but at the same time, I can't see how a connector that's being developed on a BPM system will not need, or a person who is developing a connector in a BPM system will not need access to the standard BPM information like variables, business keys, and all that stuff. So how the SDK layer integrates with the standard runtime services, process instance services, and all that other utilities.
Preeti, you want to take that question, or should I take that question?
I think you can.
Okay, so first of all, if you think, Preeti showed that little snippet, right? That little code snippet on like, this is how a connector looks like. And you've seen, maybe I can also share my screen and go on just on the Connector SDK side and show you a little bit of the documentation that we have. It should look very similar, I believe. Let me share. Can you see it now? Yes, I think you should be able to.
I can see it.
So basically, this is the outbound connector. Basically, this is not a send money, but this is just a ping connector, and just it does a little pong, right? So what you see, the outbound connector basically that connects Camunda, like basically that makes Camunda cause side effects in external systems. Basically, Camunda calls external. It is very similar to job worker. So we have this question also in chat, so maybe I can just, so it makes sense to pick it up here. So it is very similar, but it offers you additional, basically it offers you a framework around also validation. So validation basically of those shared behaviors is always going to happen in the same way. There's always going to be a structured way how those connectors report errors back, if there's any input errors, right? So we want to make sure as you use those connectors, and I will jump into maybe one usage example so everyone can just see what Preeti showcased in just a second. We want to make sure that as people are using those connectors, and I call it modeling and reusable building blocks. So basically they use them from the modeling experience. We need to make sure that validation is always happening in a structured manner. Also secrets always work in the same way. So because from the user's point of view, that is consuming all those behaviors, communicating with Slack, sending an email, sending message to Stripe, or pulling message from some account via Stripe, right? Or sending like invoking a Lambda function, whatever you can think of. The UX from the modeling, from the person that models, it should always be the same. So basically what we're doing with the connectors framework, we are opinionated in terms of this is a way how you validate, this is a way how you're supposed to handle secrets. And by doing that, basically, we first make it easier for people to implement a connector because they don't have to make all those choices. There's so many different ways how to actually handle secrets. And we tell you, well, you can either plug in your own provider, or the default is we'll read secrets from the environment variables. So that's basically the choices that we already provide to you out of the box and properly document, so you don't need to worry. And also this framework around validation, in a very same way, it allows you to basically, we make some decisions for you. And also because you mentioned, so in this particular case, the variables that are coming here, they are obviously coming, those variables are runtime, like basically process variables, right? And when we talk about the business key is obviously also in here, right? So the business key is passed into the connector as a variable, so it can actually be used. So So basically all the context, the BPMN context, the execution context that is there, that is basically being passed into the connector. Let me actually share you one example how that connectivity works, because it's oftentimes easier to see that end to end. So I have a little playground process here. Let's see what it actually does. Okay, it has an entirely broken BPMN diagram, but let's start from scratch. And Nele, if we take too long to answer this one question, you cut me off anytime, okay?
I think it's completely okay, because I think I saw this question also in Slido, so take your time to answer it. It's good to understand it, I think.
Good. So right now what you see is, what you see in the modeler, I'm not taking the perspective. I'm not taking the perspective of someone building a connector, but I'm actually taking the perspective of someone consuming the connector. So right now, this is basically the built-in Slack connector. And what you can see is there is slight differences to the standard way how you would see the properties panel, right? So just for comparison, standard way how to use a properties panel for a service task, it's something like, yeah, send task is actually also service task like. So you see a lot of engine details here, right? You need to understand inputs, outputs, headers, and so on. The fact that we are using task definition. For Slack, actually, when I send a message, I'm being picked up on an entirely different level. I'm being picked up on a domain specific, right? So basically domain specific inputs and outputs. If I want to talk to Slack, I need to provide an OAuth token, because this is just how it works. If I want to enter a secret, Slack token, I can enter the secret in a safe manner. And then I would actually basically maintain that secret somewhere else in console next to my cluster. And then I basically have all this domain specific information, including validation. Ah, okay, that's wrong. So I basically need to either call general, or I can actually talk to Nico Rehwaldt, right? So there you go. So this is basically just from the modeling side of things. And so the SDK that Preeti showcased, it is specifically tailored towards this use case that I'm very, very quickly able to, including feedback that I get, to use those building blocks, but also the runtime needs to provide feedback in a structured manner. Something is broken, some input is missing, and so on and so forth. So that's basically the purpose of the connectors. So the connector SDK, we built it in a way that it really supports this notion of modeling in, like, build your processes and reuse the building blocks. And I want to give you one example, the last example, and then, you know, I hand it back to, we'll look for another question. So this is a Slack connector, as you can see, right? You always, due to the nature of the connector, it is basically, it supports the dynamic secrets. But honestly, in my organization, don't I have just a single Slack app that I'm reusing? It's kind of stupid. Anyone, not stupid, but it's kind of redundant. Why does everyone need to enter that secret when he wants to use a Slack connector? So basically what I've done is, let's see where it is. Do I actually have my my beta Slack connector? I think it has the wrong name. I don't know. I don't have it. I don't have it anymore. I'm not sure where I put it. But at least I can use it. So basically what I'm doing here is I'm choosing send a better message. So what does send a better message do? There's one difference. As you can see, I don't need to plug in the secret anymore. It's out of the box, because in my organization, I always have this one pre-configured Slack app to communicate. I have this one way to send emails via pre-configured secrets, so I don't need to actually pass that stuff. So Connector SDK is the one side, building the runtime. And the other very important pillar is what we call connector template, or, like, for those that are a little bit longer in Camunda, element template, right? Which is basically, so those two things are what makes this whole stuff very powerful. All right.
Cool. I think that was a good question. And I think it's interesting to see that, because we also want to make it as easy for the person filling in the attributes for the connector. And if you don't need the SQL all the time, it makes completely sense. I share my screen again with a question view. I think this question was now answered. What is the difference between the Connector SDK and a job worker? So I mark that as done. Preeti, is there anything that piqued your interest that you would like to answer from the questions? I can scroll down.
Just at a quick glance for the contribution in other languages. So today our SDK, it is Java, but based on input, we can certainly create other ways to code this as well in addition to Java. So it would be good to hear what are the other programming languages that is quite popular with our user base in addition to Java.
Cool. I don't find the there. That's the
there,
question,
sorry,
right?
first one. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Perfect. Cool. Yeah. I mark that as ticked as well. Cool. Nico, do you have a question you like to answer?
I have. My favorite question is, will there be webhooks available as part of Connector framework?
It's
I
also
like
the
that.
most. It's also the most upvoted one. And I saw when you shared your screen, you had a webhook template. So I think you are more than happy to answer this.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's a great question because it's ambiguous, right? So what do they mean? So is it about, sending, outgoing? In this case, it basically means that we just emit a stream of events, but likely it's about inbound connectors. So basically, I can configure GitHub to just send the stream of consciousness to Camunda, and based on that information, Camunda is doing certain things. For example, Camunda is correlating a message, or Camunda is starting a process instance. And the answer is inbound is is basically what we're using to validate our webhooks is what we're using to validate our inbound connector SDK. So webhooks will be the moment inbound launches will be provided out of the box as basically the first inbound connector. Why? Because it makes so much sense. But also inbound in generally it's hard. While outbound, Victor, I've mentioned it, that outbound is actually, you could argue, well, how is it better than a service like basically a job worker, right? And the answer is, well, just a little bit, maybe, but for inbound, we'll offer a large amount of utility. And I would like, if that's okay, if that's in scope, Nele, I would also like to elaborate, why is it a little bit harder, right?
Sure.
So if we think about outbound is, we already have the existing concept, right? The job worker is basically someone is being called and then it does anything with an external system, HTTP request, whatever. Outbound connectors are stateless. Awesome. And if the job worker doesn't return within the configured timeout, the engine says, okay, that didn't work, and basically just fails the task. So that's a very easy programming model and we already have it. Inbound, it basically means because something is configured on the diagram, on a start event, the start event would configure the webhook, right? It would configure, okay, on this webhook, basically, I want to listen in on, a certain place under a certain condition. I want to start this instance, which means we would need to have a way to first identify the fact that the diagram has been deployed. And then we basically need to create this connection before the first process instance is even created, right? So inbound by nature is stateful. And every senior engineer on the call knows that stateful versus stateless, it's an entirely different story. So that is one of the interesting challenges that we have. And this is also where inbound connectivity will provide you such a huge benefit if you use our framework, the SDK. Outbound, it's easy. You can continue with job workers. Not easy, but you could continue with job workers all day if you wanted to. Inbound, I guess, will give you much more incentive if you want to build this inbound connectivity to actually rely on our inbound connector framework. That's just my assumption, but let's see. We'll validate it with the community and we get everyone's feedback.
Have you already have ideas how to implement it? Are there already design sessions taken for inbound, or is it still like discussing multiple ideas?
Well, yes, basically I mean, if that's interesting, we could I could share a little bit of this architectural, what we have in the back of our heads, right? And this is nothing that is it's not in terms of being super magical or something, but we see a lot of customers also in C7, Camunda 7 land, they're doing something very similar. So what in Camunda 7 land, what people would often do, they, for example, would intercept the deploy, the REST deploy endpoint. And if something has been deployed, they would also look at the diagram and spin up additional systems. This is stuff that different customers do. This is an existing pattern, right? So if you look at connectors for C8, but also for C7, this is a way how you want to implement it. So you need to be able to understand when did something happen on the engine, a new process has been deployed, all right? You would need to look into this process, into extension properties. It's a start event, and it says, I should only start when something, right? And then you need to set up this bit that does this when something become true, and make this when something become true. And I could actually, for inbound REST webhook, if that is interesting, I could show it.
I would say go for it. I mean, we are here for this. I think, Victor, have you ever, like, maybe a question in between, you worked with so many people in that field as well. Have you ever occurred that problem, or did you ever had to solve this, this pattern with the inbound connector that Nico described?
Yes, Neil. In some situations, as Neil described it, we use it interceptors, which is not that easy to control what kind of events you want to follow one specific flow of intercepting and splitting the business logics for different kinds of events. It's not that easy, but yeah, it's very common. It's very common. And to be honest, now I am understanding the inbound connector idea.
Nice, Nico. I think we are both interested in seeing it because I haven't seen it either. So I want you to show us what you have.
Yeah, I mean, I can just share a little, if sharing works. Yes, it does. I think so. So this is basically considering a webhook, right? And I just wanna kind of, if we go into this webhook direction, we are right now very clear on the architecture, what we want to build, but still, we're still exploring the options. Obviously, inbound will also be driven by domain-specific editing, modeling here, right? So again, this element template bit will be still already, will again play a major role in inbound. Why? Because domain-specific validation and all those things make it easy for you to use. For example, in this particular case, you have for inbound, you need to provide, given, for example, Camunda SaaS or your self-managed, it will provide a connector service somewhere, right, under base pass, right? So what I want to do is, I would in this particular case need to provide a pass, like a sub pass, and then this is basically the URL that I configure in my external systems to just send those events to. So let's call it foobar, because this is basically what everyone does. So let's imagine I could send to Camunda Cloud something / connectors / webhooks / foobar, and then what will actually happen? So in the GitHub case, GitHub webhook, GitHub will actually send this stuff to us. So GitHub will send a huge JSON payload to us, stream of consciousness, whenever some certain thing, and GitHub is not actually that good at fine-grained filtering, so you can receive all pull request events, you can receive all pull request review events, you could receive all issue created events. So basically it will send the full, this is what's happening to us. So what we need to do, and this is very common for inbound, for webhooks, we need to validate this stuff. So GitHub provides us the utility to configure a secret. So we configure something very secret, which is called hello world. This is our secret. And we put that secret in GitHub. So GitHub will actually put it into the request, and we're able to, via that shared secret, we're able to validate, is it actually GitHub sending, or is it some random, some bad actor trying to start our process instance? But that's also a very common pattern inbound. So now we have the problem that GitHub actually shares the stream of consciousness with us, everything. But we need to filter, for example, we want to start a process, and we want to start the process only when it is actually for the Camunda organization. So think again in this idea, we get this payload, right? So we get a request. So we want to make sure what is the condition when it actually activates. So in this, it would be request dot body.pull request.repo, and then you have something, there's likely typos in here, right? But, and this is feel, by the way. So if you wonder, we're picking up feel in a lot of different places.
Yeah,
so
you can always see feel if you have this the symbol next to condition. There's a symbol,
Yes.
and that means you can enter a field expression.
Yes. So basically, if I format it a little bit more nicely, yes, that's also easier for me to follow along. So this particular case, the inbound connector, the actual effect that we configured will only start when the repository, sorry, this is wrong. It has to be something full name or something, right? Starts with Camunda. So there you go. So now the next question as well, in the process, I'm not interested in all of this, right? So what is the actual business data that I need to start the process? I hope it's only a few of those, bits. So what I will do next, and this is also a recurring pattern in connectors, I'm actually able to create my context, like basically this is a field context, but it's also very close to JSON. For example, I could take the repository name, and this will be a process variable, right? And I will just assign that to whatever is configured here. So this is the full round trip. This is basically the full integration example I'm configuring an inbound webhook. I'm defining activation criteria. I'm basically defining shared secrets to validate that it's actually coming from the right person. And then I'm able to map that stuff into my process. And then it will automatically, when we deploy that stuff, it will automatically be picked up by this connector component that will work in self-managed and SaaS at some point, and like Camunda Cloud. And then it will just work. GitHub starts to send those events. It will check the conditions, and based on the conditions, the actual effect, like start a process, will happen. Mm-hmm. So that is kind of in a nutshell the direction we're going right now. But please, it's always this, we're going into this direction. We're validating right now. So that's something that is important.
But it's super interesting that you share this today with us on an early stage. I think getting feedback is always good. If someone from the community has feedback, I think we always have open ears for that. I said something in the beginning that we answer the question that I asked latest, and I think, Preeti, that might be a question also for you here. Are there any connectors for PagerDuty as well? Or is there something planned? I mean, you showed us a roadmap, and I think you are in charge of the roadmap. That's why I think this might be a good question.
So as you guys saw in the roadmap today, we don't have anything specific for this, but our intent is, it should be very easy to build such a connector. If others may easily provide this as well, but today for us, it's not on the roadmap, but if there is more demand, we can certainly look at it. But it is important for us to realize that Camunda won't be providing all of the connectors that you're looking for, because again, it is just not a scalable way to provide connectors. So we really want to focus more on that infrastructure for connectors to be easily built by the community, by partners, by customers, to be able to be used across everyone.
I mean, I think also if we have that framework and the SDK, maybe it would be a good one for the community to pick up. Why not having a PagerDuty connector built by the community? I think with the SDK available, would be maybe something nice to try out.
Definitely.
Actually, so a great idea what we could think of, just, copy chatting a little bit. Why not have a public repository where everyone could just ask for a connector? Community members can upvote, and if community members implement it, contribute back, kind of, they get a little, welcome, thank you package or whatever, right? I mean, anyway, a lot of that stuff is community driven, right? And for those things that are out of our core scope right now, it should be very straightforward, let's say.
I like the idea. I think that's an interesting idea.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Victor?
Sorry, Nele. So maybe I could share my screen and show what I've been doing in terms of connectors.
Sure.
Yeah.
Wait, I don't want to annotate something. I just stopped sharing my screen. Happy to see your connectors.
Yes, very quickly, because it's just in the first stages. Just a second. Can you see my screen?
Yes,
Yep.
we see your
Oh, okay, so nice.
You can see the desktop right now. So
what about now?
Now we see your GitHub.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. So since I had access to the connectors template feature, I started to build a connector to the Hey Due Date project, which is a project I created and pushed in GitHub a few months ago. The idea is to solve a very annoying problem, which is calculating due dates for processes. So the inputs for the Hey Due Date is the calendar, a start date time, and the SLA minutes. With these information and all the calendars configured on the back end, you're gonna have the due date and the explanation of how that due date was calculated. Right, so playing with my organization, I created this connector, which will allow the user to provide the calendar information, the start date, and the SLA. As Nico was showing, just configuring the properties here in the JSON. By the way, the JSON editor here, it's really great. It can give us some insights about if we are doing right, or when we are using the wrong property and that kind of stuff. That's a very good job, guys. I think there is something new, which is the upload icon here. I haven't seen this a few weeks ago, isn't it? Yeah,
it's new. Basically, the core behind I didn't see that question, but the core behind it is like, what does C8 connector templates, how is it different from C7, stuff that we have for a long time? And one of the things is also iconography on diagram. We think that those building blocks, it's very important also to be possible to identify those quickly, especially when it's shared business functions, right? So for example, you have a nice icon already attached, and here what you can see, you can very easily just attach any kind of icon with your connector.
Yeah. By the way, I think I saw a question about this. Someone asking if actually why the icon here was replaced, the service task by this one. The person was worried about, it's not BPMN, maybe people, business mothers will find this weird, but this is optional, right? So if you don't want to use our icon, just don't use it.
Perfect. That's a perfect answer for that. Really, that's basically what we've discussed it internally as well. I mean, we're BPMN enthusiasts, at least quite a bunch of people in the company. So that's the answer. It is optional. If you want to keep everything a blank service task, you can absolutely do so.
And yeah, that would be it.
That's pretty cool, actually.
Nice to see it.
Yeah. So now let me stop sharing.
I think.
Can you help me to stop and share my screen? Because
let me see if I can.
Can't find
the. I have not the power. Let me see if I have it.
Don't you have the power?
Not really. If I start sharing my screen, it says no.
Oh, not fixed. There you go.
The Slack power is missing sometimes. Okay. Cool. Thanks for the insight. And I jump back one more time to Slido. I mean, we are almost at the end, but this is going so great and so interesting. I think we should have one last question. And there are still so many. I don't know. Preeti, do you want to pick up a last question? Did you see something?
All right.
If you don't, I have an interesting one from Uwe. So, and it's also the latest question in terms of, prioritizing what has been asked.
Let's go for I think that's a good point, Nico. Preeti, are you okay with that if we take Uwe's question here?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so the question, is there any kind of connector visibility planned and operate? For example, which connector is used in that task? Is it healthy? Protocol log of the connector. It's an I think it's a roadmap question, basically, if we plan something. Nico, you have an answer to that?
I have a general answer. I don't have a roadmap answer. Preeti is the one to answer roadmap items. But I mean, generally, if you think about connectors, you think about those reusable building blocks. I can actually reuse what Victor builds. So there's a couple of topics on my checklist. First, it's a matter of trust and also being able to review what he did, right? If I roll out certain connectors in the organization that can consume secrets and all that stuff, right? So this kind of openness and also being able to audit what I'm actually using. So that is important. So the second, before I even, choose a connector and basically use that in my organization, in my core business processes. So second one, as I use them, and this is a question that Uwe asked specifically, is it actually healthy? Is that connector actually running, right? And beyond input errors, which can happen all the time, right? Is there more critical issues than input errors? And Operate is our tool to visibility into like what's the health of our processes. And well, the answer is we want to have something like that midterm, right? It does make so much sense. And given that we have the connector framework established around basically we basically provide you with a frame you can plug in. You could imagine how much easier it is for us to also extend that frame. For example, health checks. It's a very common thing if you implement a service. You could imagine how easy it actually is to add an additional health check that you have to implement if you want to provide that connector, especially inbound connectors when it's stateful, when it's it does matter if it is running, because only if it is running, then it's actually capturing those GitHub webhooks. So I think that's a great question, and this is why I wanted to elaborate on it. So we don't have we don't have a ETA when it actually is going to launch, but that's definitely something that we know is extremely important for production use. Just you consume those things, you want to make sure at any point that it's actually working.
Mm-hmm, definitely. Okay, I have to say it's not the last question, because I saw this question here, the event-based gateway question, and I cannot finish the question corner without answering this one here. I know there are other ones, but it's also the latest one, and it's a quick answer because it's a modeling question. Basically, we have an event-based gateway. We have two messages probably attached to it, and once we hit one message, the other one gets lost after the second message comes in. And basically that's the design of BPMN. You have a racing condition here. So you can it's always one message that triggers the event-based gateway that takes the token from the event-based gateway to the outgoing sequence flow. That means if your token is not waiting there, the second message is not important at that part for the process. So in this case, with an event-based gateway, you will miss that message. On the other end, if you use ZB Camunda 8, there is a different pattern about missing or correlating messages. So there are different features. So you don't necessarily need always a token to be there for the message. But when it comes especially to the event-based gateway, it is necessary to understand you can just trigger one of the outgoing sequence flows. Sorry, I had to answer this question because I thought we have to help you, that person. And I mean, there are so many other questions left, but our time is almost up. Please feel free to go to our forum, ask your questions in the Camunda forum. We are all around in the Camunda forum. Victor is there, I'm there, Nico is there from time to time. We are happy to answer the questions that we couldn't answer today. And we are also happy to continue the conversation in the forum. So don't be afraid or angry if we couldn't answer the questions. I come to an end now because I have some last slides to share basically before we finish. We have some great upcoming events at Camunda. We have our meetup groups that are happening virtual and in person, and you see some of them here. So if you always wanted to travel to Mauritius and you couldn't make it, there is an online meetup. So maybe you can join this. We also have a hybrid event in Poland and an in-person event in Hamburg. So yeah, if you're around, would be great to see you there. We do user experience research. So if you want to be part of that, scan this code and get invited. We have different tests all the time. And if you want to get feedback on the tooling so that we can improve it, I think it's a great way to do it. We have our Camunda Developer newsletter. So if you enjoyed that event or this event, and if you want to be part of more Camunda events, please join the developer newsletter and you will get always the latest news. Save the date and buy your ticket. We have CamundaCon coming up 5th to 6th of October. We will be hybrid. That means you can come and see us in Berlin, but we will be also online available for you. And even more important is that one day before the CamundaCon, we have our Camunda Community Hack Day. It will happen the 4th of October in the Berlin office. And if you want to join this, please sign up for it. It will be a fun day with a short time of hacking. I'm aware of that, but we will hack all together something, and I guarantee you it will be a lot of fun. And of course, we are also hiring, we are growing. So especially our consultant team ask if someone is watching here, this question corner, and if you are also enjoying answering Camunda questions, this might be for you. So feel free to check out our career page. And with that, I think we finished almost in time. So thanks for joining, and see you the next question corner. And thanks to the special guests. Thanks,
Thank you.
Victor, thanks, Nico and Preeti. It was a great conversation.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.